On this Friday night, a critical step towards reconciliation. The Supreme Court's unanimous ruling to uphold the Indigenous child welfare law.
A huge win for our children.
The profound impact on First Nations, Métis and Inuit families and the rejection of Quebec's constitutional challenge. Cash injection, the multi-billion-dollar remedy to ease the strain on Ontario's healthcare system. Targeted and terrorized.
Don't be scared, be strong.
The violent attempts to extort Canada's South Asian community. Plus, proud, poignant, and punishing memories.
I never, ever dreamed I'd be back there.
A Canadian D-Day veteran's wartime reflections.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Neetu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Indigenous communities have scored a landmark victory from Canada's Supreme Court after it unanimously upheld the federal government's 2019 law on Indigenous child welfare as constitutional. Bill C-92 affirms First Nations, Métis and Inuit have sole authority in protecting their children. And today's ruling dismisses Quebec's efforts to appeal it after arguing Ottawa overstepped its jurisdiction. As David Akin explains, Supreme Court justices stress the conclusion is necessary to advance reconciliation efforts.
This is a change, and it's a change welcome that is required.
The path to Friday's Supreme Court ruling started in 2019 when the federal government passed legislation which affirmed that First Nations, Métis and Inuit peoples have an inherent right of self-government, and that includes jurisdiction over child and family services. But the Quebec government, ever sensitive about Ottawa intruding on what it perceives to be provincial jurisdiction, argued that the 2019 law was unconstitutional because child and family services are regulated by provinces. The Supreme Court disagreed, saying not when it comes to Indigenous peoples.
I screamed. I was really happy. It was, just a great, wonderful moment for our children, a huge win for our children.
In fact, the court praised the federal legislation for addressing historical wrongs. For most of Canada's history, the judges wrote, lawmakers have wrongly employed a policy of assimilation.
Settler governments have long acted as if they know better what is good for us than we do ourselves.
The essential matter addressed by the Federal Act involves protecting the well-being of Indigenous children, youth, and families by promoting the delivery of culturally appropriate child and family services, and in so doing, advancing the process of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples.
This ruling reiterates the message that we have been emphasizing for years, that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis are best placed to ensure the wellness of our own populations.
Hugely important because it's empowering our nations to take up their rightful traditional roles as decision makers in their children's and families' lives.
For a federal government that came into office promising to make reconciliation a priority, the court's judgment is a vindication of sorts.
What I say is this is a clarion call for all provinces and territories to be partners in this reconciliation.
As for the Quebec government, it said its argument was never with Indigenous peoples, only with Ottawa. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
Ontario has become the latest province to sign on its share of a nearly $200 billion health funding deal from the federal government. The money is aimed at easing the pressures healthcare systems across the country are facing as they cope with staffing shortages and major backlogs. Ontario is set to receive $3.1 billion over the next 3 years. And as Mackenzie Gray explains, some doctors say the cash won't be enough.
It's an admission many Canadians already knew.
Let's be honest right now. We're facing significant challenges to healthcare right across the country.
And to try and fix that, Ottawa's handing over $3.1 billion in new healthcare cash for Ontario to try and increase access to family doctors, reduce wait times, and hire more healthcare workers, in a bipartisan agreement with the progressive Conservative Premier.
I don't care if you're from the blue party, red party, purple party, pink party. We're going to do stuff together to get things done.
The money traces back to last February when Trudeau and the Premiers held a healthcare summit. Ottawa promising new cash to the provinces to deal with an unwanted record, wait times of nearly 28 weeks to receive proper care. And cutting deals to rectify that has also been slow. Ontario is only the 5th jurisdiction to reach an agreement with the Liberals, which includes sharing provincial health data with Ottawa.
that's going to have a huge difference in making sure that we can deliver the care that Ontarians need.
A strain in Ontario that likely won't be substantially changed. The new injection only represents a 4.2% increase in the province's healthcare budget from the last fiscal year.
I think it's going to help, but I don't think anyone who either is firsthand seeing the state of our healthcare system or working in it believe that the fundamental problem is a lack of a few $1 billion. I mean, this is a huge generational problem we're dealing with.
Generational gaps also seen in doctors' offices and emergency rooms across the country, where burnout from the pandemic and low staffing levels push mid-career healthcare workers to quit.
When you don't have a family doctor, when you're waiting a long time for surgery, things add up. And unfortunately, I think this is why we're in the shape that we're in.
The Prime Minister will be under more political pressure next week when frontline doctors and nurses protest on Parliament Hill, Neithu, against further privatization in healthcare.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mackenzie. Russian President Vladimir Putin sat down for his first interview with a Western-based media outlet since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Why don't you just call Biden?
In video from Tucker Carlson Network, former Fox News host Tucker Carlson rarely challenged Putin during their more than 2-hour conversation at the Kremlin. Putin used some of the time to mock Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Canadian officials for applauding Yaroslav Hunka during Zelensky's visit to Ottawa in September. Hunka was introduced to the House as a Ukrainian-Canadian veteran who fought against the Soviet Union in the Second World War. It was later revealed he was part of a Ukrainian battalion fighting under Nazi command.
He will, of course, use whatever propaganda he can engage in. But I can tell you, Canadians will not be fooled. We see the lengths to which Russian propaganda will go to try and impact public opinion, to try and twist things.
Trudeau pushing back today against Russia's messaging and reiterating that Canada stands with Ukraine. Putin has claimed he invaded Ukraine to defeat neo-Nazis, something that is widely dismissed as propaganda. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered his country's military to prepare an evacuation plan to get civilians out of the southern city of Rafah ahead of an expanded ground offensive in Gaza. More than 1 million people are living in overcrowded conditions along the Egyptian border after fleeing Israeli airstrikes in the north. As Crystal Goomansingh reports, aid groups say it's impossible to get everyone out.
Deadly airstrikes on Rafah, a sign of the expanding Israeli military offensive in southern Gaza. In a press release Friday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu requested an evacuation plan for civilians, putting the world on notice for the second time this week, saying Israeli forces would be moving further south to the last place of sanctuary for the people in Gaza.
We're all at a loss as to where people could possibly go.
Take a look at these satellite images showing Rafah in November 2023 versus January of this year. You can see the buildup of people. Rafah's population today is 5 times what it was before October 7th, says humanitarian aid worker Shayna Lowe.
And so right now, what our colleagues are telling us is that they're really trapped between Israeli tanks on one side and the Egyptian border on the other, with nowhere to go.
Netanyahu claims there are 4 Hamas battalions operating in Rafah and that for his country's safety must be eliminated. Those in Rafah say it's families who are dying. This child lost her mother, father, and brother. She says they were sleeping and woke up to the sound of bombs. She called out for her family, but no one answered. Thursday, Israel's closest ally, the President of the United States, made the strongest and most publicly critical comments of the operation yet.
The conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. There are a lot of innocent people who are starving, a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying, and it's got to stop.
Netanyahu has repeatedly said the only option is total victory and that Israel is acting in self-defense. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
U.S. President Joe Biden has fired back against the Justice Department's report into his alleged mishandling of classified documents. The special counsel's report determined Biden will not face any charges, but scrutinized his age and mental state. It went as far as to say Biden forgot when his son died, a claim he angrily denied.
There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, wasn't any of their damn business.
The special counsel claimed Biden showed diminished faculties and faulty memory during interviews. The report also suggests that had Biden been charged, he would present himself to the jury as, quote, a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. The spokesperson for the White House counsel's office also slammed the report, saying it made gratuitous and inappropriate criticisms of the president. There's some promising new research that could change the way allergies are treated. Scientists in Ontario have discovered a new cell that remembers allergies. As Catherine Ward explains, its unique characteristics could help develop future treatments and even a cure.
There's a level of anxiety that I never knew I would have that will never go away.
That has been Renee Mackenzie's reality since her daughter Lucy was 6 months old. The now 6-year-old has anaphylactic allergies to sesame and certain kinds of nuts.
I jokingly say that sesame is the glitter of the food world because it is sprinkled on everything and it's just such a highly cross-contamination item.
Daily life is punctuated by a checklist of planning for the worst-case scenario.
Anytime we go somewhere, it's how many EpiPens do you have? Are we going to a cottage? How far away is the closest hospital? Just in case she eats something, do we have enough EpiPens to get us from point A to a hospital?
But new research is offering up hope for the future. Scientists at McMaster University, along with others in Denmark, independently discovered a new type of cell. They're calling the cells type 2 memory B cells, and researchers say they're responsible for the body remembering allergies.
This cell is the one that when we are exposed to an allergen, that it will make more of these allergic antibodies and it'll keep us allergic for the long term.
Report author Josh Koenig says the discovery paves the way to figure out treatments or even cures for conditions like anaphylaxis.
Knowing which cell that we need to go after is really important because now we can, in a precision way, go in and find the pieces to change to ultimately develop better therapies.
Food Allergy Canada Executive Director Jennifer Gertz says more than 3 million Canadians are affected by food allergies, including 600,000 children. Discoveries like this one are significant milestones for the community.
It would be completely liberating for people if there was a cure for this condition, because it would allow us to freely participate in everyday life.
Catherine Ward, Global News, Toronto.
On high alert, coming up, the rising number of South Asians in Canada becoming victims of extortion. An increase of extortion cases across Canada is targeting businesses with South Asian owners. Police in Peel region near Toronto revealed earlier this week that its special task force is investigating 29 cases of extortion dating back to November 2023. In Edmonton, there have been 34 cases of extortion, arson, or firearms offenses since October. Peel police say there are similarities with extortion attempts in British Columbia as well. As Heather Urex West explains, the mayors of Surrey, BC, Brampton, Ontario, and Edmonton have all appealed to the federal government for help.
There was standing room only at a community meeting in Edmonton Thursday night, as hundreds from the city's South Asian community gathered to learn what police are doing to keep them safe.
This is not hurting the builders alone. This is hurting everyone in the community.
Since October, home builders and other South Asian business owners have been terrorized by a series of arsons and extortion attempts.
They are worried about their safety. They are worried about the safety of their family members, obviously worried about the safety of their business and their property.
Edmonton police say they have made several arrests in connection with the more than 30 crimes. They expect to make more, but they don't believe all of these cases can be connected. This problem is not Edmonton's alone. At least 3 Canadian cities have seen a sudden increase in extortion crime against South Asians since late last year.
We have heard the community and hear the fear in our South Asian community, in the business community.
In Ontario, Peel Regional Police set up a special extortion investigative task force to deal with the surging crime.
This is insane, and it should not be happening in Canada.
At a press conference in Surrey, BC Friday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre blamed the problem on federal catch and release policies, promising mandatory jail time for those convicted of extortion crimes. Last month, the mayors of Brampton, Surrey, and Edmonton wrote to Ottawa for help. Due to the connection with international organized crime and the instances of extortion across Canada, I ask that you lead a coordinated response. Community leaders are urging anyone being targeted to come forward so police and government can understand just how big of a problem this has become. Heather Yurex, West Global News, Calgary.
Ahead, the world record that nearly went up in smoke. Two rivals are claiming victory in Pakistan's 12th general election. Former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif declared his party the winner and vowed to form a coalition government. Another former Prime Minister, Imran Khan, released a victory speech in a social media post using artificial intelligence. He's in jail for corruption and breach of national security. Only about 3/4 of the results have trickled in a day after the vote. And there are widespread allegations of manipulation and tampering. But it appears Pakistan's powerful military failed to secure a landslide victory for Sharif, its preferred candidate. Prince Harry has reached a settlement for the remainder of his phone hacking claims against the publisher of the Daily Mail. Harry had sued Mirror Group newspaper, saying he was a victim of hacking and other illegal snooping. In December, a judge awarded him more than $238,000 Canadian in damages. But only a fraction of the articles Harry complained about were looked at during that trial. To settle the outstanding claims, the Mirror Group will now pay all of Harry's legal costs. A man who built a model of the Eiffel Tower out of matchsticks has had his world record dream rekindled. Richard Plode spent 8 years creating this 7.2-meter tall sculpture using more than 700,000 matchsticks and more than 50 pounds of glue. Guinness World Records initially told him he didn't make the cut because he didn't use matchsticks that were commercially available.
We're happy to be able to admit that we were a little bit too harsh on the type of matches needed in this attempt, and Richard's attempt truly is officially amazing.
Plode beat the previous record-breaking 6.5-meter tall Eiffel Tower model that was built in 2009. Canadian swimming phenom Summer McIntosh has done the unthinkable. She beat American superstar Katie Ledecky in the 800-meter freestyle. It snaps a 13-year winning streak for Ledecky. McIntosh, who's only 17 years old and hails from Toronto, finished almost 6 seconds ahead of Ledecky, setting a Canadian record and personal best. Next, a Canadian veteran reflects on sacrifice as he celebrates a milestone.
Am I too heavy?
No, hang right in there, look at the camera and smile.
Friends and family gathering to celebrate a very special milestone for Canadian veteran Russell Kay. Today is his 100th birthday. He's one of the few Canadians still alive who took part in D-Day. For decades, he preferred to forget that pivotal point of the Second World War. As Mike Armstrong explains, Kay now wants to remember.
Well, I looked after myself.
When you sit down to talk to somebody who's hitting 100, it's hard not to ask how. Russell Kay's tip: stay busy and don't mope.
If you get up in the morning and look at the window and feel like going back to bed, that's not going to make it.
Now, a part of that plan may be focus. He chooses to remember, like his time serving in the Second World War. One of his most vivid memories isn't about a battle, but about finally getting home and seeing his parents and brothers.
They went wild when they saw me go. I remember that day as well as yesterday.
After the war, Kay stayed in the military. He was in for close to 3 decades. But he would spend most of his life, he says, burying memories from the war. He'd seen too many men killed too young.
20, 18, 21, 22, all those young guys. I sit there, what a waste of life.
Kay and his late wife Eleanor raised a family. He had a second career with Corrections Canada.
I was born in Gagetown.
Kay's son Chris joined the Army, as did 5 of Kay's grandchildren. But it wasn't because any of them, or anyone at all, had heard his stories.
I don't think people in Corrections Canada even knew he was a veteran, because he never talked about it, he never went to Remembrance Day, he never did any of that stuff.
It was only a few years ago that Kay started to let himself remember. As one of the last Canadians still alive who landed on Juno Beach, he was invited to return for the 75th anniversary. A camera with the group Wounded Warriors Canada captured that moment.
I never, ever, ever dreamed I'd be back there, and that moment was, you can't get any better.
Now, there is an irony that after a life spent trying to forget what he saw, Kate now wants to remember something that happened in the same place. He says, looking back at his 100 years, it turns out one of the worst days of his life, and one of the best, were both spent in the same place, on a stretch of beach thousands of kilometers from home. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Riverview, New Brunswick.
And wishing you a very happy birthday, Russell. That is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is the statue of the late Queen Elizabeth II on her horse Burmese near the Saskatchewan Legislative Building in Regina. We love seeing Your Canada. Please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks so much for watching. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.